Hey, my name's Marcus Kane. I'm 32 years old, born and raised in the south side of Chicago, but I've been clawing my way through life in Manhattan for the past 7 years. I work as a senior financial analyst at Blackstone and Reed, one of those glass tower investment firms in Midtown, where the coffee costs $8 and everyone's wearing Tom Ford suits they can't really afford. Not glamorous, despite what people think. Most days, I'm staring at spreadsheets until my eyes blur, running numbers for deals that make millionaires into billionaires, while I'm still paying off my Columbia MBA loans. I wear the same three charcoal suits on rotation, grab a bodega coffee with too much sugar at 6 a.m., and squeeze onto the packed 6 train with 1,000 other souls pretending they're not one emergency away from falling apart. My older brother Jake used to say I had a gift for seeing angles nobody else could, finding opportunities in chaos. Marcus, you're the guy who'd sell ice to Eskimos and make them thank you for it. He'd laugh over cheap whiskey in our cramped apartment in Harlem before he enlisted. That was 10 years ago, before Afghanistan, before the IED that sent him home in a flag-draped coffin. Mom never recovered. She started drinking heavy, lost her nursing job at Mount Sinai, and spiraled into a depression so deep I couldn't reach her no matter how hard I tried. I became the man of the house at 22, juggling community college classes with 2 jobs, bussing tables, and doing overnight security at a warehouse in Queens, wiring every spare dollar to keep the lights on in Mom's Section 8 apartment in Brooklyn. But last October, everything imploded. Mom was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, the kind that moves fast, vicious, giving you weeks instead of months. I took out personal loans, drained my 401k, even borrowed from loan sharks in Chinatown, guys with cold eyes who don't do payment plans. I spent 3 weeks by her hospital bed at Bellevue, watching her waste away under fluorescent lights that hummed like insects, holding her hand as she whispered Jake's name in morphine-fueled dreams. When she finally let go, I was $127,000 in debt. Hospital bills, funeral costs, back rent on her apartment that the city came after me for since I'd co-signed years ago. Now I'm drowning, and the sharks are circling. Lately, things have gone from bad to catastrophic. 2 months ago, Vincent Rossi, the loan shark I borrowed $40,000 from, sent 2 of his guys to my apartment at 3 a.m. They didn't beat me, not yet. Just stood there in my living room, one cracking his knuckles while the other calmly explained that interest had ballooned to $65,000, due in full by December 31st, or they'd start with my kneecaps and work their way up. Nothing personal, Marcus, just business, the tall one said, his breath reeking of garlic and menace. I've been dodging their calls, changing my route home from work, jumping at every shadow. My boss noticed my performance slipping, called me into his office last week with that sympathetic but firm tone. Marcus, you're a smart guy, but you're distracted. Fix it, or we'll have to make changes. Translation: shape up or you're fired. I've tried everything. Picked up freelance consulting gigs on weekends, sold Mom's wedding ring and Jake's military medals on eBay for pennies, even considered robbery, standing outside a Chase bank at midnight with my hoodie up, hands shaking, before I chickened out and walked home in shame. Nobody wants to help a guy who looks like he's already lost. My college buddies stopped returning texts. My girlfriend Sarah left me 3 months ago, saying she couldn't watch me self-destruct anymore. I spend nights lying awake in my studio apartment in Washington Heights, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to sirens wail down Broadway, doing the math that never adds up. How do you outrun a debt that's eating you alive? How much lower can a man sink before he just stops swimming? That Tuesday morning in late November started like a waking nightmare. I was at my desk by 7 a.m., mainlining burnt coffee from the office Keurig, trying to focus on a merger analysis that was due by noon, but my phone kept buzzing with blocked numbers. Rossi's guys. Each call sent a jolt of panic through my chest. I silenced it, but the dread sat heavy in my gut like a stone. My inbox was a graveyard of red-flagged reminders, credit card companies threatening lawsuits, my landlord's lawyer demanding 3 months back rent, a text from an unknown number with just a photo of my apartment building. They were watching me. That's when the email pinged. Subject line, urgent, my office, 9 a.m. sharp, E.H. Elena Hartley. The name alone commanded respect and fear in equal measure. She was 47, the COO of Blackstone and Reed, a woman who'd built her empire from nothing. Grew up in Detroit, daughter of a factory worker and a hairdresser, worked 3 jobs to get through Wayne State, then clawed her way up Wall Street in the 90s when women were still told to smile and pour the coffee. Now she ran the firm with an iron fist wrapped in Hermes scarves. Tall, sharp-featured, with silver-streaked black hair, always pulled into a severe bun, and eyes like glaciers, pale blue and unreadable. She never spoke unless it mattered, and when she did, people listened. Rumor had it she'd once fired a VP mid-presentation for misreading a quarterly projection by 0.2%. Precision or poverty, she'd said. Choose. I'd only interacted with her twice, once during my interview where she'd grilled me for 40 minutes on behavioral finance theory, and once at a company gala where she'd nodded curtly in my direction before disappearing into a circle of hedge fund titans. Why the hell would she want to see me? My performance reviews were solid, never late on deliverables, never caused drama, unless this was it, the firing. My stomach twisted as I rode the elevator to the 52nd floor, the executive suite. Her corner office was a cathedral of power, floor-to-ceiling windows framing Central Park's winter sprawl, modern art worth more than my lifetime earnings, a glass desk so spotless it looked untouched. She sat behind it, fingers steepled, dressed in a black Armani suit that screamed authority. She didn't look up as I entered, just gestured to the chair opposite with one manicured hand. Close the door. Sit. I obeyed, my palms slick with sweat despite the Arctic air conditioning. She slid a thick manila folder across the desk. Open it. My hands trembled as I flipped it open, and my blood turned to ice. It was my life, dissected. Printouts of my bank statements showing the hemorrhaging accounts, copies of loan agreements with Rossi's organization, complete with his signature and threats in fine print, medical bills from Bellevue with Mom's name, eviction notices, even surveillance photos of me meeting Rossi's enforcers outside a bodega in Harlem. How did you... She cut me off, her voice low and precise like a scalpel. I have resources. More importantly, I have a problem, and you, Marcus, are going to solve it. I stared at her, my brain scrambling. A problem? She leaned back, fingers drumming once on the armrest of her leather chair. My father passed away 2 years ago. left me his seat on the board and 51% controlling interest in this firm, contingent on one condition buried in his will, that I be married and demonstrate family stability by my 48th birthday. It's an archaic, sexist clause designed by old men who thought a woman needed a husband to be legitimate, but it's ironclad. My birthday is January 15th, 6 weeks from now. If I'm not married, control shifts to my cousin Gerald, a trust fund imbecile who'll run Blackstone and Reed into the ground within a year and sell it off for parts to the highest bidder. Her jaw tightened the first crack in her armor. I will not let that happen. I blinked, struggling to connect the dots. You want me to find you a husband? Her laugh was sharp, bitter. No, I want you to be my husband, temporarily. A contractual arrangement, 12 months, purely transactional. You play the role in public, attend events, smile for cameras, live in my penthouse to maintain appearances. In exchange, I will erase every cent of your debt, pay off Rossi personally with enough extra that he'll forget your name, cover your rent for the year, and at the end, a $250,000 severance to disappear and start over wherever you want. Refuse, and this conversation never happened, but I know Rossi. You have, 5 weeks before his deadline. You won't survive. The room spun. This was insane, a fever dream. But the folder in my lap was real as the desperation clawing at my throat. Elena wasn't bluffing. Her eyes bored into me, waiting, calculating. Why me? I managed. She tilted her head, considering. You're unremarkable enough not to attract scrutiny, you're desperate enough to agree, and you're smart enough to play the part convincingly. I've watched you, Marcus. You adapt. You survive. That's what I need. She slid a pen across the desk, next to a contract thick as a phone book. You have until 5 p.m. today to decide. After that, the offer evaporates, and you're on your own. I left her office in a daze, the folder tucked under my arm like contraband. The rest of the day blurred. I sat through meetings without hearing a word, pushed food around at lunch without tasting it, and rode the train home in a fugue state. Back in my apartment, I spread the contract across my wobbly kitchen table, reading clauses under a flickering bulb. It was meticulously detailed: public appearances, no infidelity clauses, shared living space, enough financial terms, even a script for how we'd met, at a charity auction for underprivileged youth in the Bronx, where I'd bid on a date with her for a laugh, and she'd been charmed by my audacity. All lies, but polished lies. That night, I didn't sleep. I paced my 8x10 apartment, weighing the cost of my soul against survival. Pride screamed that I was better than this, that selling a year of my life to a woman who saw me as a chess piece was rock bottom. But desperation, cold and rational, whispered that rock bottom was a luxury I couldn't afford. Rock bottom was Rossi's guys breaking my legs. Rock bottom was dying broke and forgotten like Mom, like Jake. This was a lifeline, a devil's bargain, but a lifeline nonetheless. By 4:45 p.m. the next day, I was back in Elena's office, pen in hand. I signed on the dotted line, each stroke of ink feeling like a nail in a coffin or a key to a door. I couldn't tell which. As I set the pen down, Elena nodded once. No smile, no warmth. Pack tonight. A car will pick you up at 7 a.m. tomorrow. Welcome to the performance of your life, Marcus. I walked out into the cold November dusk, the city lights blurring through the sleet, and wondered if I'd just saved myself or sold my soul to a woman who might destroy me. Act 2. The Gilded Cage. The car that picked me up wasn't a car. It was a black Mercedes S-Class with leather seats that smelled like money and a driver who didn't speak, just nodded when I climbed in with my 2 duffel bags stuffed with everything I owned. We cut through Manhattan traffic like a knife, gliding uptown to the Upper East Side, stopping in front of a limestone tower on 5th Avenue overlooking Central Park. Doormen in white gloves opened the lobby doors, ushering me into an elevator that required a key card to access the penthouse. When the doors opened directly into Elena's apartment, I stepped into a different world. The place was a monument to control. 3,500 square feet of marble floors, vaulted ceilings, modern art that probably cost more than small countries' GDPs. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the living room, offering a panoramic view of Central Park's frozen reservoir and the city stretching beyond like a glittering circuit board. Everything was white, black, or chrome, minimalist to the point of sterile. No family photos, no plants, no clutter. Just expensive furniture arranged with surgical precision and a silence so profound it felt oppressive. Elena was waiting in the kitchen, an open-plan space with countertops that gleamed like mirrors, pouring herself a scotch from a crystal decanter. She glanced up, expression neutral. "Your room is down the East Hall, second door. Unpack. We have dinner reservations at Per Se at 8. Dress code, navy suit, white shirt, no tie. We're meeting Gerald and his wife. First test." I found my room, a guest suite bigger than my entire old apartment, with a king bed draped in Egyptian cotton, an ensuite bathroom with heated floors, and a walk-in closet already stocked with clothes in my exact size. Tailored suits, Italian shoes, cashmere sweaters. She'd thought of everything. I showered in a rainfall shower that felt like a spa, dressed in the prescribed outfit, and met her in the foyer at 7:45. She was in a black cocktail dress, diamonds at her ears, hair down for once, cascading over her shoulders in controlled waves. She looked stunning and untouchable. "Remember the story," she said as we rode the elevator down. "Charity auction, October 12th. You bid $5,000 as a joke. I accepted out of curiosity. We connected over shared histories, blue-collar roots, dead parents. Love at first sight is cliché, so we're going with mutual respect that grew into affection. Got it?" I nodded, my throat dry. Per Se was everything I'd imagined and nothing I'd experienced. A temple of haute cuisine in the Time Warner Center, all hushed tones and obsequious waiters. Gerald was already seated when we arrived, a portly man in his 50s with thinning hair, a weak chin, and eyes that gleamed with barely concealed hostility. His wife, Delilah, was younger, mid-30s, blonde, dripping in jewelry, and clearly bored. Gerald stood, shaking my hand too hard. "So, this is the mystery man. Marcus, was it? Elena's been so secretive. We only found out about the engagement through the grapevine. Quite the whirlwind." His smile was a shark's. "Whirlwind is one word for it," Elena said smoothly, sliding into her chair. "When you know, you know." Dinner was a performance. Gerald grilled me with questions disguised as small talk, where I grew up, my education, my family. I stuck to the script, adding flourishes where I could, mentioning Jake's service, Mom's nursing career, my MBA. Delilah barely spoke, sipping wine and scrolling through her phone under the table, but Gerald wasn't buying it. "Fascinating," he said, cutting into his Wagyu beef. A financial analyst marrying the COO. Some might call that opportunistic. Elena's fork paused midair, her eyes flashing cold fire. Some might call it love, Gerald, but I wouldn't expect you to understand nuance. The table fell silent. Gerald's face reddened, but he forced a laugh. Touchy. I'm just saying the board will have questions. Optics matter. The board will have no questions once we're married, Elena said, her voice steel wrapped in silk. Which will be December 20th. You're invited, of course. The rest of the dinner crawled by, every course a new layer of tension. By the time we left, my jaw ached from fake smiling. In the car ride home, Elena stared out the window, her knuckles white around her clutch. He knows, she said finally, or suspects. He'll dig. I leaned back against the seat, exhausted. Then we bury him in the performance. She glanced at me, something like approval flickering in her eyes. You did well tonight. Keep it up. The next 2 weeks were a blur of rehearsals and public spectacles. We attended galas, museum openings, charity events, always arm in arm, always smiling. Elena was a master at this. Her warmth turned on like a switch for cameras, then off the moment we were alone. At home, we lived like polite strangers. She worked 18-hour days, leaving before dawn, returning after midnight. I kept my job at the firm, fielding curious glances and whispered rumors from coworkers who'd seen the engagement announcement in the New York Times. Marcus Kane, senior analyst, to wed Elena Hartley, COO, in intimate ceremony. Intimate. The word was laughable. Our wedding was scheduled for December 20th at City Hall. Quick, legal, no frills. Elena's PR team spun it as elegantly private, but I knew the truth. It was efficient, transactional. The night before, she came home earlier than usual, around 10 p.m., and found me on the couch, scrolling through photos of Mom and Jake on my phone. She paused in the doorway, still in her coat. Second thoughts? No, I said, locking the screen. Just thinking about what they'd say if they could see me now. She sat down on the opposite end of the couch, an ocean of white leather between us. What would they say? I exhaled slowly. Jake would call me a sellout. Mom, I don't know. Maybe she'd understand. She did whatever it took to keep us afloat, even if it hurt. Elena was quiet for a long moment, then spoke, her voice softer than I'd ever heard. My father used to say that survival isn't pretty. It's compromise and sacrifice and doing things that keep you up at night. But it's also strength. You're still here, Marcus. That counts for something. It was the first real thing she'd said to me, and it cracked something open. Why me, really? I asked. You could have hired an actor, someone trained for this. She looked at me then, her pale eyes unguarded for a split second. Because actors lie for a living. You lie to survive. There's a difference. I need someone who understands stakes. We sat in that shared silence, two broken people playing house, and for the first time, it didn't feel entirely fake. The wedding was at noon. Elena wore a simple ivory sheath dress, no veil, no flowers. I wore a charcoal suit. There were no guests, just a judge, 2 witnesses pulled from the courthouse staff, and a photographer Elena hired to document it for the board. The ceremony lasted 7 minutes. When the judge said, "You may kiss the bride," Elena leaned in, her lips brushing mine, soft and brief. It felt like sealing a contract. We signed the marriage certificate in the hallway, her hand steady, mine shaking slightly. As we left City Hall into the gray December cold, reporters swarmed. Someone had tipped them off. Cameras flashed, questions shouted. Elena smiled, waved, her hand laced through mine, and I played my part, grinning like the luckiest man alive. Inside, I felt hollowed out. Back at the penthouse, Elena poured us both champagne, a rare gesture. "To 12 months," she said, raising her glass. "To survival," I countered. We clinked, drank, and then she disappeared into her study, leaving me alone. That night, I lay in my king bed, staring at the city lights through the massive windows, and wondered what the hell I'd become. Mrs. Elena Hartley's husband, a kept man, a ghost in a gilded cage. But the debts were gone. Rossi had been paid off. Elena showed me the wire transfer receipt, $75,000 sent to an offshore account, with a note. "And Mr. Kane's obligations are settled. Do not contact him again." I was free from that, at least. But freedom felt like an illusion when I was tethered to a woman who barely saw me as human. The holidays came and went in a haze of forced cheer. Christmas at Gerald's estate in Connecticut, a sprawling colonial packed with extended family, all of whom eyed me with suspicion and fake politeness. New Year's Eve at a black-tie gala where Elena gave a speech about new beginnings while I stood backstage, adjusting my cufflinks and rehearsing my smile. By mid-January, the act had become routine. I knew how to stand at her side, when to laugh at jokes, when to place a hand on the small of her back for photos. We were flawless and utterly empty, but cracks started showing. One night in late January, I came home to find Elena on the terrace, despite the 20-degree cold, smoking a cigarette. I didn't even know she smoked. She looked up as I stepped outside, her breath fogging in the air. "Didn't peg you for a smoker," I said. "I quit 15 years ago," she replied, taking a drag. "Bad habit for bad days." "What happened?" She flicked ash over the railing, watching it spiral down 40 floors. "Board meeting. Gerald's pushing for a vote of no confidence. Claims I'm distracted, that the marriage is affecting my judgment. He's rallying support." I leaned against the railing beside her. "Is he winning?" "Not yet, but he's persistent." She looked at me, really looked, and for the first time I saw exhaustion etched into her face. Some days I wonder if this was worth it, the lying, the pretending. "You tell me," I said. "You're the one who started this." She laughed, short and bitter. "Fair, but you agreed." "Because I didn't have a choice." "None of us do, Marcus. We just pick which version of trapped we can live with." That conversation shifted something. After that night, we started talking more. Little things at first, how our days went, frustrations at work, memories of people we'd lost. She told me about her father, a cold man who'd pitted her against Gerald since childhood, making love conditional on performance. I told her about Jake, the way he'd shielded me from bullies in high school, how his death had left a hole I couldn't fill. These weren't scripted, they were real. And slowly, painfully, a fragile bridge formed between us. By February, we'd fallen into a rhythm. I'd cook dinner sometimes, simple stuff, pasta, stir-fry, and she'd actually sit and eat with me instead of working through meals. We'd watch old movies on the weekends, her curled into one end of the couch, me on the other, the space between us shrinking week by week. One Saturday, she laughed at a joke I made about a terrible rom-com we were watching, a real laugh that lit up her face, and I realized I liked making her laugh, liked seeing her human. It was mid-March when everything changed. We'd been invited to a charity gala in the Hamptons. Black tie, high profile, crawling with board members and investors. Elena's PR team framed it as essential, a chance to show united strength against Gerald's whispers. We drove out Friday afternoon, the city melting into suburbs, then beach towns still waking from winter. The estate hosting the event was obscene, a mansion overlooking the Atlantic with manicured lawns and ice sculptures shaped like swans. We were given a guest suite naturally, one room, one bed, for appearances. That first night after the gala's cocktail hour, where we'd smiled and schmoozed for 3 hours, we retreated upstairs. I loosened my tie, collapsing onto the bed, while Elena kicked off her heels with a sigh of relief. "I hate these things," she muttered, unzipping her gown. I turned away, giving her privacy, but caught her reflections in the window. Vulnerable, human. "You hide it well," I said. She laughed softly. "Years of practice." She disappeared into the bathroom, emerging in a silk robe, her makeup scrubbed off, hair loose. She looked younger, softer. We lay on opposite sides of the bed, a demilitarized zone between us, staring at the ceiling. "Do you ever think about after?" she asked quietly. "After the 12 months?" I turned my head to look at her. "Sometimes. You? More than I should." Her voice was barely a whisper. "What would you do? With the 250,000? I thought about it. Maybe move somewhere quiet. Open a bookstore or something. Stop running." "That sounds nice." She turned to face me, her eyes searching. "What if?" She trailed off. "What if what?" "What if we didn't want it to end?" The question hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. I propped myself up on one elbow, heart pounding. "Elena!" "Forget it," she said quickly, turning away. "Stupid thought." But I reached out, my hand covering hers on the blanket. "It's not stupid." She looked back, surprise flickering across her face. "You mean, I said carefully. "This started as a transaction, but somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling fake, at least for me." Her breath hitched. "Marcus?" And then she kissed me, not the polite, performative pecks for cameras, but a real kiss, urgent and raw, her hands tangling in my hair, mine pulling her close. We fell into each other like drowning people finding air, months of tension and loneliness, and pretending exploding into something real. That night, the lines we'd drawn blurred completely, and when I woke the next morning to find her curled against me, her head on my chest, I knew I was in deep, deeper than any contract, deeper than survival. I was falling in love with a woman who might not feel the same, and that terrified me more than any debt or threat ever had. Act 3. The Unraveling. The weeks after the Hamptons were a strange, intoxicating blur. Elena and I didn't talk about what happened that night, not explicitly, but everything shifted. She started coming home earlier, trading power suits for sweaters, cooking with me instead of ordering takeout. We'd sit on the terrace at sunset, sharing wine and stories, her laughter becoming a sound I craved. The walls she'd built around herself crumbled piece by piece, and I let mine fall too. We talked about dreams deferred, her secret wish to teach finance at a university someday, my buried desire to write, maybe a novel about survival and second chances. It felt dangerously close to real, but reality has a way of crashing in. In early April, Gerald made his move. An email arrived in Elena's inbox, CC'd to the entire board, with the subject line, "Concerns regarding COO conduct and potential fraud." Attached were documents, copies of our original contract, somehow obtained, complete with financial terms and the 12-month clause, screenshots of my debt records pre-marriage, even private investigator reports with photos of Elena and me from before the wedding, cold and distant, contrasted with recent ones where we looked genuinely close. The implication was clear. The marriage was a sham designed to circumvent her father's will, and now we were scrambling to cover it up with fake affection. Elena read the email at the breakfast table, her face draining of color. "How did he get this?" she whispered. I leaned over her shoulder, my stomach knotting. The contract had been locked in her office safe, encrypted files, attorney-client privilege. "Someone leaked it," I said. "Someone close?" Her hands shook as she set down her coffee. "Margaret, my assistant, she's been with me 8 years. I trusted her." The betrayal cut deep. Margaret had access to everything: schedules, files, passwords. If Gerald had gotten to her, offered her money, or threatened her, she could have handed over the smoking gun. Elena's phone started ringing immediately, board members demanding explanations, her lawyer calling for emergency meetings. The press somehow got wind. By noon, tabloid headlines screamed, "Blackstone COO's marriage of convenience exposed," and "Wall Street love scam inside Elena Hartley's fake wedding." The fallout was swift and brutal. An emergency board meeting was called for the following Monday. Elena was put on administrative leave, pending investigation. The firm's stock dipped on rumors of internal chaos. Paparazzi camped outside our building, shouting questions whenever we tried to leave. Elena holed up in her study, working the phones, strategizing with lawyers, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She was losing control, and control was all she'd ever had. That weekend, Gerald went on CNBC, playing the concerned family member. "I have nothing but love for my cousin," he said with practiced sincerity. But the evidence suggests she manipulated a legal instrument to retain power. If true, it's a betrayal of shareholder trust and our father's legacy. The board must act. It was a masterclass in character assassination. Subtle, plausible, delivered with just enough regret to seem reluctant. Elena watched from the couch, her face a mask, but I saw her hands clench into fists. Sunday night, she broke. I found her in the study at 2 a.m., surrounded by documents, her eyes red-rimmed. "I'm going to lose," she said hoarsely. "Gerald's got 6 board votes locked. I need 8 to keep my position. The investigation will drag for months, and even if I'm cleared, the damage is done. I'll be the COO who cheated her way to the top." I crouched beside her chair, taking her hands. "Then we tell the truth." "Which truth?" she snapped. "That I bought you? That we started as a lie?" "No," I said firmly. "That we started as a transaction, but somewhere along the way it became real. That I love you. That this," I gestured between us, "isn't fake anymore." Her eyes widened, tears spilling over. "You what?" "I love you, Elena." The words felt like jumping off a cliff, terrifying and liberating. I didn't plan to. Hell, I fought it, but I do. And if there's even a chance we can save this, I'll fight for it. She pulled me into a kiss, desperate and fierce, and when we broke apart, she whispered, "I love you too. I didn't want to. Didn't think I could, but you made me believe I'm more than just the title and the control. You made me human again. We held each other in that dim study, two people against the world, and for the first time the outcome didn't matter as much as the fact that we'd face it together. Monday morning, the boardroom was a war zone. 16 members seated around a mahogany table, Gerald at one end, smug and polished. Elena and I entered together, hand in hand, flanked by her legal team. The chairman, an older man named Robert Keene, called the meeting to order. We're here to address allegations that Mrs. Hartley engaged in fraudulent conduct to satisfy conditions of her late father's will. Gerald, you have the floor. Gerald stood, distributing copies of the contract, my debt records, everything. The evidence speaks for itself, he said. Elena orchestrated a marriage of convenience with an employee she barely knew, a man drowning in debt, to circumvent the spirit of our father's wishes. This isn't about love or family. It's about power. And it's unacceptable. Murmurs rippled through the room. Some board members nodded. Others looked uncomfortable. Robert turned to Elena. Mrs. Hartley, your response? Elena rose slowly, her posture regal despite the storm. Yes, she said, her voice clear and unwavering. I entered into a contractual marriage with Marcus Kane. I won't insult your intelligence by denying it. My father's will was an archaic, sexist mandate designed to control me from beyond the grave, and I refused to let it strip me of everything I've built. I chose Marcus because he was desperate, yes, but also because I saw in him something I'd lost: resilience, integrity, the ability to survive hell and come out standing. She paused, looking at me. What I didn't anticipate was that he'd become my partner in more than name, that he'd teach me humility, that he'd remind me why I started this work in the first place, not for power, but to build something meaningful. The contract was a means to an end, but what we have now is real. I love him, and if that disqualifies me in your eyes, so be it. But don't let Gerald, who's never worked a day in his life for anything he has, convince you that ambition and love are mutually exclusive. The room fell silent. Gerald's smirk faltered. Touching speech, he said, recovering, but love doesn't erase fraud. Then let me speak. I stood, my heart hammering. All eyes turned to me, a junior analyst crashing a boardroom of titans. I signed that contract because I was broke and scared. Elena offered me a way out, and I took it. But over the past months, I've watched her work 18-hour days, fight for this firm's success, and sacrifice her own well-being for people who don't even know her name. She's not perfect. She's stubborn and cold and bad at asking for help. But she's also the most brilliant, driven person I've ever met. And yeah, we fell in love. Maybe that wasn't the plan, but life rarely goes to plan. You want to talk about fraud? Gerald's the one who hired private investigators to dig through our trash, who bribed Elena's assistant, who's using this family drama to seize power he hasn't earned. You want a leader? Choose the one who fights, not the one who schemes. The room erupted. Some board members argued. Others demanded evidence of Gerald's bribery. Robert banged his gavel, calling for order. Enough. We'll take this to a vote. All in favor of removing Elena Hartley from the COO position, raise your hands. 6 hands went up, Gerald's block. All opposed, 8 hands rose. The room exhaled collectively. Robert nodded. The motion fails. Mrs. Hartley retains her position. However, given the circumstances, we recommend a 6-month probationary review and full transparency moving forward. This meeting is adjourned. Gerald stormed out, his face purple with rage. Elena sagged in her chair, relief and exhaustion crashing over her. I pulled her close, and she whispered, "We did it." But it wasn't over. Outside the building, reporters swarmed. We pushed through, cameras flashing, questions shouted. That night, the story hit every major outlet. Blackstone COO survives ouster attempt. Love and Power, the Elena Hartley saga. Public opinion split. Some called us manipulative. Others saw it as a modern love story. Two broken people finding each other. The next months were grueling. Elena faced constant scrutiny, every decision dissected. I left my analyst job, the conflict of interest too glaring, and took a position at a nonprofit, using the skills Elena had sharpened in me to help low-income families navigate financial systems. It was humbling, meaningful work, and it reminded me why I'd survived, to help others do the same. Elena and I moved out of the penthouse, selling it for a brownstone in Brooklyn with creaky floors and a garden we tended together. She scaled back her hours, started teaching a night class at NYU's Stern School, sharing her knowledge with the next generation. We were building a life, messy and real. The contract's 12-month mark came and went. No fanfare, no severance check. Just a quiet evening on our brownstone stoop, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. "So," Elena said, leaning against me, "we made it?" "Yeah," I said, kissing her temple. "We did. Do you regret it? Any of it?" I thought about the fear, the lies, the near destruction, but also the love, the growth, the second chance. Not for a second. She smiled, that rare, unguarded smile I'd come to treasure. "Good, because I'm not letting you go." Our wedding, the real one, was the following spring. A small ceremony in Prospect Park with friends, a few board members who'd become allies, and a surprise guest, my brother Jake's old army buddy, who'd tracked me down to say Jake would have been proud. Elena cried real tears as we exchanged vows we'd written ourselves, promising not perfection, but partnership, not ease, but effort. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better, real, hard-won, ours. In the end, the contract that was supposed to save us had nearly destroyed us. But it also forced us to confront who we were beneath the armor and desperation. Gerald eventually left the firm after a bribery investigation exposed his dealings. Margaret issued a public apology, admitting Gerald had threatened her family to secure the leak. The firm stabilized under Elena's steady hand, and I found purpose in work that mattered. We were happy, not because everything was perfect, but because we'd chosen each other again and again through every storm. As I write this now, 5 years later, sitting in our brownstone's garden while Elena grades papers inside, I realize that survival isn't just about making it through the worst. It's about what you build after. And what we built, from ashes and contracts and broken pieces, is something unbreakable, not a deal, a life. And that's worth more than any contract could ever promise.